Well, hello and welcome to this Rare Leadership webinar. My name is Nick Harang, and I'm so glad you're able to join us today for what we trust will be a very encouraging and helpful hour. The past few years have been hard on pretty much everyone, and the challenges that we normally face in the workplace have only increased and been magnified with what's going on in the world today. And if we're honest, there's very little we can do to control what's going on out there in the world. But what we can do is we can work on growing our own emotional intelligence. We can work on developing our own relational leadership skills. And we can become the kind of leader, not that people have to follow because it's their job, but the kind of leader people want to follow because of who we are and how we lead. So whether you're the founder and the president of your organization, or whether you just started a new entry-level job at a new company, we trust that today some of the perspectives and the examples and stories you hear are going to equip you to continue growing in your leadership journey. And before we get started and introduce our panelists, I want to let you know about what's coming up here in just a month. We have our, we have our Rare Leadership Conference coming up in a month. If I can switch my slide. There we go. So we have a half-day Rare Leadership Global Online Conference. You can join it from anywhere live on Friday afternoon, May 6th. And you can also just, if you can't make it that day, you can purchase now. You can register yourself or your team now, and you can access the recordings and go through it as a team at any point this year, or go through it yourself to continue to grow in your leadership journey. And we have some fantastic speakers that are going to be joining us. The co-authors of the book, Marcus Warner and Jim Wilder, are going to share some new content about how to navigate the high-stress workplace. We'll have General Ray Woolridge as well with us, hosting and moderating a panel. And today, we're going to hear from two of our guests at next month's conference, and that's Virgie Maney and Dave Mead in just a moment. And we were able to secure a recorded interview with General Becky Halstead. She wasn't able to join us live because she is on the go globally all the time, but she was willing to carve out one day in the month of April to record an interview about how she has navigated several toxic and high stress workplaces in a relationally healthy way. So we hope that you can make plans to join us for that in a month. You'll hear a little bit more about that, but I want to go ahead and begin to introduce our guests today. So I want to welcome on Virgie Maney, our first guest. Welcome, Virgie.
Well, good morning. Thank you. And good afternoon. It's great to be here.
So glad that you can join us. Virgie was part of our Global Online Rare Leadership Conference last year, and we got tons of positive feedback of people saying, we want to hear more from her because she's the real deal. So thank you for making time today to have a conversation. And if for those of you that don't know Virgie, she began her career as a teller at Wells Fargo. And just because of who she is and how she grew as a leader in that crucible, if you will, she ended up rising to become a senior leader, managing a team responsible for training over 250,000 employees around the world. And so now Virgie is a sought after coach, a trainer, a motivational speaker, and she serves as the founder and president of Maney and Associates. So thank you again for being here, Virgie.
Thank you, Nick.
And we also have with us another hit from last year, Dave Mead. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, Nick.
Thanks for joining us. And for those of you that don't know Dave, he served in the military, the U.S. Army, for 31 years, rising to the rank of colonel. And he was also a faculty member at the Center for Strategic Leadership in the U.S. Army War College. So he has tons of leadership experience. He's now the founder and CEO of WeAlign, which is a strengths-based coaching firm that serves clients in the corporate world, health, government, nonprofit, military, and beyond. So these guys are, the reason why we invited them on is because they're rare leaders. They've been embodying this in their lives. In some cases, long before the book was ever written, they became this kind of a person. And they've honed their craft of leading well in tough environments. So without further ado, I want to invite on our host for today's conversation, Marcus.
Hey, Nick. Good. Hey, Dave, George, Virgie, nice to be on with you guys today.
Yeah, I want to just mention who Marcus is for those of you that might be new. Marcus is the president of Deeper Walk International and author of over a dozen books, including Rare Leadership and Rare Leadership in the Workplace, and just has a special knack for taking complex things and making them simple, understandable, and immediately practical in your life. So
Mhm.
Marcus, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take us into today's conversation with our friends and these rare leaders.
I appreciate it, Nick. And this is fun. It's nice to have you guys on. Just for our audience sake, why don't you let them know where you're coming from today? Where are you joining us from today, Virgie?
I am actually coming from Oakland, California today. Nice, beautiful weather.
Nice, beautiful weather. That's good.
Yes.
And how about you, Dave? Where are you at today?
Yeah, I'm in Colorado Springs. We're doing
That's
well here. Delighted to be
doing well. Yeah, you guys get a lot of sunshine there. It's I'm joining from the Indianapolis, Indiana area. So we have snow some days and 80 degrees the next. So it's kind of the springtime here.
Mhm.
It's been fun. I'm always amazed. I'm still amazed that you can jump onto these things and everybody can be that far away and still everything be instantaneous. It just I guess that's a sign I'm old, but
Oh, no, with technology, we enjoy technology.
yeah, it's got its perks, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, let's talk about rare leadership a bit. Now, the part of the story behind writing the book was that I was in a leadership cohort with Dr. Wilder. And Jim Wilder, for those who don't know, is kind of the neuroscience expert behind the Life model. He was the head of a counseling center in Southern California that was dealing with some of the most difficult and trauma cases in all of California. And that was according to the people who came and reviewed what they were doing from the state. And they were having success in areas that a lot of people had not seen success in before. And part of it was he was on the cutting edge of the neuroscience and applying these things to how the brain works under stress and under pressure and with emotional difficulty. So I had started to write a book on leadership and realized I was quoting Jim a lot. And so I thought, hey, you know what? I should probably just see if Jim would be willing to do this book with me. And it was great because it just took everything to another level because of his knowledge and insight. So he's connected directly with Life Model Works, which is an organization that we're connected to, partner with as well. Both of you have connection. I thought we might start with just saying, how did you get connected to Life Model and to Jim Wilder and his stuff along the way? So Dave, you're like the chairman of the board of his organization. Okay. Why don't you go first on this?
Yeah, the accidental chair. The way I got to know Jim and eventually you, Marcus, was through the book.
Okay.
I was given the book through a friend who gave it to, who Jim Martini had given it to. I read the book. I said, this is fantastic. And basically connected with both Jim and Jim, spent a day, and I had read the book, but it was total left brain. And by the way, I laugh that, being a rare leader for me is literally just the last couple of years. I've spent, 58 years of my life not being a rare leader, every other way but. And Jim Wilder was very gentle and kind and realized that he later said, you're like every other leader, very unself-aware. And I need a lot of help. And that was the start, though, was actually the Rare Leadership book. And through other training, literally changed my life.
Well, that's I'm glad to hear I had a little role in that. That's good. I'm glad you guys get you connected there. Virgie, how about you? What was the connection for you?
Well, the connection for me started back in about 2016. There's a lady by the name of Tina Dyer, which you all know. She spoke several times in these events, and she became a direct report of mine at Wells Fargo. So at any rate, in 2016, we were having conversations and going to another separate event, and she mentioned about Strive, and she just kind of gave me a little context about it, and I thought, wow, that would be interesting. And that was all that I knew. And so we went to our first Thrive workshop. And I think that was in Texas, I want to say. And we went there, and that's when going through that week was just, it was just speechless. It was something that you look back, and today I'm still experiencing the effects of what we went through. It was just quite a great experience for me. And in going through that at the time, because it's linking the brain to the Bible, I was just so amazed at what I did not know. And then, of course, at that time, learning all that I learned, then we found out that we had an immediate family member that was in need of mental wellness support. So it really was perfect timing for me to go through and understand that there was so much more happening in the brain that I just had no idea. So that's what my first experience was.
Well, it's yeah, there's a lot of us who can relate that we have family who we know immediately benefit from some of the things we've learned. And all of us, I think, have these aha moments where like, oh, so that's what's going on with me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And both of you have mentioned Thrive. Just so people know, Thrive is run by Chris and Jen Corsi. Chris and I also have co-authored some books on marriage and parenting together. And based on this same neuroscience that is underneath all of this. So they do a great job of offering training on relational skills based on this brain science. So just people are aware of what Thrive is. That's actually where I met Dave. We were in a group there at a Thrive training thing, working on our relational skills together. And it is funny because, you know, there's such a whole new paradigm that comes with this, right? It's like it changes, it gives you a new vocabulary. You find yourself describing things with different words. You find yourself looking at life through a little bit different paradigm or lens. So let me just ask this. So what are some ways you've tried to put rare leadership principles into practice before you had this vocabulary, right? And then how did maybe having some of the vocabulary help with that? Yeah. Virgie?
Well, for me, it was, I remember so vividly, people would ask me this question about what's your leadership style? And, you know, how do you do what you do? And, Guy, you need to tell us more. And I was just really limited. And all I could say I used phrases like, well, it's just who I am. Or, you know, I would use phrases like, well, you know, I try to meet people where they are and kind of dance with them in that moment. Or I would say things like, well, you know, first of all, I try to look at myself and say, okay, let me look at me first, and then let me look at the individual. Or I would look and try to say, okay, I want to make sure I communicated well what it is that I was saying, because if there's a gap, then where did that gap come from? So it was those type of phrases that I would use in terms of having communications with individuals. And until I came into the rare leadership, and what was interesting for me, and some may have heard my story before, was when my direct report, Tina, who reported to me, said, hey, here's what you do. This is your style. And that's when she introduced me to rare leadership. And I have to tell you, when I started to read the book and looked at the descriptions and to see what the book was saying, I mean, really in words, I immediately adopted it. And it was interesting to tell people, well, what is your style? Oh, rare leadership. I'm a rare leader. Okay, and what does that mean? So it's an interesting conversation, but it gave me the language to really not only to communicate or articulate to others. I think what was most important for me is I began to know who I was. I saw myself, and when I saw myself, and also being connected from a spiritual perspective, which was so critical for me, it just gave me a rooted, solid foundation to stand proud, to know this is who I am, and who I am, it's really okay. So that was my experience.
No, I appreciate that's really insightful. I know one of the things that hit me when I went through here was this idea of who I am is related to joy. And that was a brand new concept for me, because I always thought who I was somewhat melancholy, a little bit anxious, and, you know, I didn't think of myself that my true identity is who I am when I'm living out of joy from a brain perspective. That was really freeing, I think, just in and of itself. So I like the fact that it is a good tool for holding up kind of a mirror to look at yourself and through a different kind of filter. So Dave, how about you? What was yours?
Yeah, my leadership experience before rare was total left brain. In fact, as I think back at my military training, is that emotions get in the way. You need to go ahead and be cool and calm, collected at all times, mission first. We would say we want to take care and love our soldiers, but it was without any type of relational skills or understanding of the brain, you just go through some old leadership training that I bet you we all have had. That, you know, how do you drive results? How do you take care of people? But it's all left brain. There's no connection. And so that's where I was, unconnected. And here's the sad part. Transparently, it wasn't just at work. It was with my family, with my wife, with my friends. And I probably the biggest comment I've had over the last 5 years is, I know you now, Dave, more than I ever could know, because I can actually use words to describe how I feel or what emotions I'm feeling versus thoughts that I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that too, because one of the questions I got asked when the book first came out was, you know, this seems pretty touchy-feely. You know, what do people in the corporate world do with this? What do people in the military do with this? Because this really transfer, does it really apply? So how would you answer that from a military perspective? And I'll go over to you, Virgie.
Oh yeah, it totally applies. It's like fighting a battle with one hand tied behind your back. If you want to go in half brain, go ahead. But the truth is, our brains are designed and fueled by joy, exactly right. And that once we get in that position, we're actually more effective, more creative, we're more. We're everything we're designed to be. So if you want to go ahead and try to struggle through life halfway, then go half brain, stay in the left. But if you want to know what fullness of life or the abundant life or the effective life is, then you've got to have an integrated brain. And we can help you with that.
Yeah, that's good. About corporate world there, Virgie, what'd you find out?
Yeah, you know, that's why I love Dave, because Dave started on the left side. I started on the right side. And I always felt that, you know, wow, am I too happy? Am I too positive? Does this demean the leader that I am? Because of my positivity, do I need to bring it down? Does it have a place here in the corporate world? Because you would see both sides, but what you would notice is a lot of the work from a strategic perspective, it's a lot of the do this, do that, the project, the terms, you know, it's that 1, 2, 3. You're really being that systematic type of work. And for me, I always said, okay, that's the part of my brain that doesn't work well. But then what I learned, especially going through reading Rare Leadership, I realized that, to Dave's point, you need both. You can't be half and half, because you feel half full, half empty, but it's also draining. So then I realized that being positive and optimistic is amazing. And it also has its place, but that part of the left brain is also needed to, as I say, dance together. You have to melt the two together, because there are times when I tell people, I get tired of me. It's too much. You've got to bring it down and be able to find the balance, and it needs to be situational. What is it that you're working with? And not only what are you working with, who are you working with? So being able to understand the left and the right and to find the balance between the two, it also positions you to be a leader of all people. So now you can connect with individuals at different levels and in different places.
No, I appreciate that. You know, we've been throwing around left and right brain here a little bit when we haven't explained it to people. So why not, because, you know, in our culture, we tend to use left and right brain almost like metaphors. Like if you're a really creative person, you're right brain. And if you're just analytic, you're left brain. So, you know, give me a little bit of your understanding when you say I was right brain, I was left brain. What are you thinking when you say, like in the past, Dave, you said you were very left brain. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, my world was in my thoughts and data and facts. And, you know, I just wasn't anything I ever seen modeled or even explained to me before, where I thought my world was the right world. It was the world I knew. And then with some other deeper issues like attachment styles, mine was avoidant. And so my happy place was just go back in my thoughts. And I would actually avoid relationships or difficult conversations or anything hard. So the very thing that we've been designed for relationship with one another in groups, it was the very thing I was running away from, because it felt safe to me to be predominantly on the left thinking, logical, rational side of my brain. And so, yeah, I was losing out. I wasn't able, and by the way, and a lot of compassion, because again, I've spent the vast majority of my life here. I can pick up now when people are trying to be relational, but they are still stuck in the left brain because they're giving, it could be, they're justifying or they're being rational. They're explaining. Well, all that is left brain.
Yeah.
There's no connection in the feeling. So I'm kind of like, my spidey senses are super developed that way. Tons of compassion again, because I've lived there. But if you find yourself in the explaining, defending, justifying mode, that's left brain, baby.
I remember talking to doing an event one time, and I was explaining all these relational skills, and a businessman stopped me at the break and goes, "Why are you teaching people how to be manipulative?" And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, because in his mind, he was so over here on the left side of the brain, the only purpose he could see for relational skills is to get people to do what you want, right? In order to use this to win. And so that is, again, a classic sign that you're definitely stuck over here on the left side of the brain, very analytic. It's all about results. And you couldn't see any other need for relational skills in this. And the sad thing, this was a marriage event, so he was bringing that same attitude into his marriage. But yeah, I think that that's well described, well said. So Virgie, what do you mean by right brain? What comes to your mind when you talk about this?
Oh, I'm all about the people, all about the people, all about the relationship. Have never met a stranger, can have a conversation in a minute. We'll sit there with you. And as I have been told, I make you feel that you're the only person that matters. And I can be in a room full of people, and each person is going to get that special attention. They're going to get that customized. I know you. With my team, I get to know their family. I get to know their children's name. Many of them I've only met once or twice, maybe, but I know their family. And when I start my conversation, it's going to be all about you. What's going on with you? How are you doing? I can talk about you and just sit with you. And I have to tell you, it just fills my bucket. That is the best thing ever, is just to sit with you and just say, so what's really happening with you? I can just move into the moment and sit in that corner with you and just be there with you. I mean, timeless, just stay there forever. That's what right brain does for me. And to the point of where I leave there feeling all joyful and excited. And then I look back and say, okay, in terms of detail, critical moments, or how well did I read the room from that perspective? And then I begin to learn, it's similar to Dave, I begin to learn that the whole part of the logical piece and, kind of working through the issues and kind of strategizing, I realized that, okay, that's where I had an opportunity to bring in the balance, if you will. So how do I switch and turn and bring that in and now be able to navigate and dance between the two, as opposed to staying in that one place, just the relationship? That was
That's really good. That's really good. One of the things we tried to bring home in the rare leadership model is that there's an order to these things, and that your brain is wired to go right brain first, left brain second. And so what happens is, if you don't learn to keep that right brain operating at a high capacity, you're default doing everything on the left side of your brain. And when you're on the left side of your brain, you're living out of your pseudo life. Well, like I say, it's like your false self is driving the show, not your true self. And on the left side of the brain, everything is a problem to solve. And so, for example, if somebody walks into a left brain leader's office, a problem has just entered the room. Right. It's like, now that there's a problem here, my only job is to solve this problem. Solve the problem, maybe getting rid of them as quickly as possible. I mean, whatever it is, but and whereas when we're talking about the right brain, in the terminology we use, fast track and slow track. And one of the reasons we use fast track and slow track is that for people who really know the neuroscience, this isn't just a right brain, left brain thing. We talk about it that way just for breadth of ease and connecting. But when that fast track is on, you find that you actually do a better job of reading the room. You actually do a better job of noticing what people really need, not making as many assumptions about them. And let's face it, nobody wants to be treated like a problem when they walk into the room. Right? They want to be treated like a person who's got problems that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
So no, that's really good. Well, this conference that we got coming up is the focus of this is going to be on high stress workplaces. And I've spent most of my life in ministry, right? So and everybody knows that's low stress, but I have that's sort of sarcastically, but there is a difference, I think, too, in the workplace setting specifically, that sometimes you come into these high stress settings and you got no power to change anything. You just have to kind of endure that. So why don't we start there, and then we'll move into talking about, what are some things that people might be helpful to them to know about changing cultures like that. But let's start with, if you had a situation in your life where you had to walk into a high stress thing and you just didn't have the power to do anything about changing the culture. So how did you, what was that like, and how'd you handle that? Who'd like to go first? We got Dave, can I start with you? I'm trying to go back and forth every other one here. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. Oh, yes. By the way, I think, the definition of work is mostly, the vast majority is high stress.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if anybody has a job anywhere, there's going to be times where they're going to enter in high stress. And when I have done that a lot, it's the first point is, what can I control? And it's really me. Can I remain relational, even if no one else is? And there's a couple of techniques, and I kind of like the deep breathing, 4x4 box breathing, but just to remind me to remain relational. In fact, I believe it was you, Marcus, that wrote that the number one responsibility of a leader, and I would say even for if you do not control anything, so follower, whatever, employee, number one responsibility is remaining relational, keeping RCs on. So those relational circuits, and because I can be my best self in a bad situation, but I have also gone into high stress situations, not remain relational, and it really goes bad. So again, if you want to be able to, I think for me, the number one is when I can sense it, is that I want to make sure that my relational circuits are on, that I don't get triggered myself, that in one sense, it's being the adult in the room. It's being the mature one, that I can remain me, even when nothing, when everything's beating you down, it won't beat you up. In fact, you can use that to go ahead and even grow deeper, where this is just another chance where I get to shine in being me by being relational.
No, that's really good. And just again, for terminology and definitions, RCs for people like relational circuits and RCs, what do you give a quick understanding for our listeners what you mean by that?
Yeah. And again, this is from Rare Leadership, is that imagine the right brain being like an elevator, and there's 4 stops. And the first and deepest is what we would call our attachment center. And so that's, and I'm not going to go too deep, but that's where there's great loss and all that. But the second one is actually the assessment center, which is our amygdala. And that's where you can get triggered emotions. Third one is attunement. So am I actually attuning? And the third one is our identity center. That's where I act like myself. And when I can get that elevator, so even now, when something, I can feel it in my body, so I'm attuning to my body, something's not right because my amygdala has been set off because maybe of some attachment pain. I can sense it. And then my immediate reaction and my shortcut is if you want the quickest, 4x4 breathing gets air into your brain to you. It's kind of like to remind you who you are. But that's the RCs in a nutshell.
Very good. No, I appreciate that. That's well described. So we sometimes talk about having an on-off switch in the brain, right? And that is that so when my circuits are on, my switch is on, I get access to these higher level brain functions that allow me to act like myself and remain relational. And if I get too stressed, right, it goes down. So let me just take a minute. We'll go to you here a second, Virgie, to describe what we mean by stress. Because from my perspective in talking about this with Dr. Wilder, there's stress is really emotion, right? The only thing that actually causes us stress is our emotions. And so, like, you might say, well, it's a deadline, or it's this, it's what that deadline's making me feel that causes stress. It's somebody gives me a shame message and says something negative to me in front of all of my peers, like they shame me in front of everybody else. What I fear is what that makes me feel, right? And so a high stress environment is almost completely about how do we manage emotions, right? How do we get in a situation where someone gets mad at me? How do I handle a situation where somebody shames me publicly? How do I handle a situation where I am where I'm motivated with fear because, I'm just, what's going to happen if this doesn't, is my driving factor. So I just say, when we're talking about stress, largely what we're talking about here is, how do I handle these big negative emotions that are part and parcel of leadership, part and parcel of getting work done? And you can imagine in the military, you're dealing with life and death sometimes, and in corporate world, it's close, right? You're dealing with people's lives and their careers, and there's a lot going on there. So just want to lay that background. When we talk about stress, we're primarily talking about all the things that cause us to have to deal with emotions, and those emotions, especially emotions that would tend to make our relational circuits go off, right? So Virgie, and from your experience there in the corporate world, have you found yourself in a powerless situation with or you couldn't change the culture, but you had to navigate it? What was that like for you?
Yes, and I would say to Dave, now what's interesting is you hear Dave explain all the details and the intricate parts about the RCs and so forth. Now, for me, that's like, okay, that's the part where my brain goes, all right, I get it. Okay. And then I would say, okay, so for me, and it would be just such a whole different term, but I just wanted to let the audience know that it's okay when you don't get all those intricate details, because when you have someone that you can work with that can hold the foundation of a lot of the definitions, then you can sometimes just be. It's okay to be comfortable that way. Because I say that because I was in a situation where I began to question my ability, because I wondered, well, why can't you hold those intricate details? Why can't you remember, all the steps? And why can't you remember? It was like that part of where you begin to talk to yourself, and internally, if you're not careful, you can find yourself thinking that you are less than. And this is where we have to be so careful. And this is what I love about Rare Leadership, because what it taught me and what I learned, even from a culture in an organization, there are so many times when we feel like I'm not being recognized, or I'm not being seen, or I'm not being heard, I'm not being appreciated, I'm not invited to the table. Why aren't they asking me my opinion? And when we hear that, the voices in our head start to dictate to us that there's something wrong with you. That's a problem here. And you're right, the brain starts to do all kinds of funny things, and you have to say, wake up. This does not define who you are. Know that there are parts of you that exist and that you are somebody. What I appreciate about Rare Leadership is when it talks about, that whole thing, being relational, but also, acting like yourself. Who am I? And then being able to take that and to embrace that and say, let me carry this with me wherever I go, because this is going to be the light that's going to have to remind me who I am. When I found myself in that stressful, awkward situation where I felt like I didn't have any power, and I had two other leaders that reported to me, I found that it was easy because I had already experienced working with them, building the relationship, that I was able to be transparent with them and authentic with them and say, hey, here's the truth. Here's where we are. This is what I'm experiencing. What are you experiencing? So we were able to have the conversation and be able to really have a safe place, if you will, to kind of talk through what was going on and the cultural changes that we saw. And then I was able to say, well, here's what I know that I have power. Here's what I can do. But here's a place where I'm concerned about my ability to be effective in changing and turning things around from a team perspective. And I'll go back to something that Dave said earlier, where in the book, Marcus, where you talk about my role is building a team of joy and not fear. So what I learned is that, okay, here's your experience, Virgie. Now, just like a parent, you can't just go and tell them, hey, everybody, but you have those people that you know you can have in your inner circle that you can say, okay, family, here's what's happening. Now, when we go to the team, here's the way we want to make sure we deliver the message. Because there's some things that you deliver differently. So what I learned to do is that, right, I didn't have the power. I couldn't change it. But what I knew is that I was able to endure hardship well. I had learned how to do that. That was a part of me. So this was hardship for me, I felt. But I can still be who I am. And then now this comes together. And sometimes you don't know how to describe it or articulate it, but it's just who you are, and that people just can resonate and they can sense it.
Yeah, I felt like one of the things I wanted to point out is we got a really great contrast here with the two of you, in that you apparently seem to have grown up in a relational culture where a lot of this stuff was second nature for you. You're already doing it. Mm-hmm. And it slowed you down to have to think about it because these are already habits. Yes. Right. Whereas Dave was in repair mode. How do I repair what's going on here? And so it helped him to be able to think this all through. This is how this works. This is what I need to repair. This is what's going on. And I can relate. I probably a little more to Dave. Like I was definitely on that needing to repair some of these habit side of things. And it is. And so what Rare did for you more was give you vocabulary to explain what you were already doing, which is great. That's the way it's supposed to be. But for a lot of us, it says big wake up calls. We realize, wait a second, I don't do that. Maybe there is half of my brain that is not completely engaged all the time that I need to find some tools that are going to help me jumpstart this process. So it's a good opportunity for people to understand that, I think one of the reasons that this other side doesn't stick out as much for you is it's not something you had to go through to learn from the ground up, because you got it when you were supposed to get it, early in life. I also want to point out to people that this is not meant to give shame, like some people have it, some people don't, because one of the things that Life Model teaches is that the number one reason we don't have these skills is that we didn't get taught them. It's called a trauma, right? And there was an absence of something good that we needed in our development, and we didn't get it. It's like nobody's just said, I think I'm going to be immature. I think I'm just going to shut down half my brain today and try to live without it for the next 30 years. That's not what happened. It wasn't a choice we made. It was just the natural consequence of not having learned these skills when we were younger. So part of what we're trying to do is help people get a vocabulary for understanding why this is working so well, like you're having, and then repair language for what is it that I need to do to get better at this. All right, well, let's go to this next one now. If you're going to give some, let's look at it from the other angle, and that is when you've had a chance to change the culture, like you've been in a position of influence where you could do something to bring that kind of transformation. What have been some things that you found helpful that you've done, that you kept in mind as you've been doing that? So we'll go back to Dave since. I love the word joy. For those that are familiar, it's a real relational term. It means I'm glad to be with you. And what that does for me is I am genuinely glad to be with you. And our brains are super smart. We know when somebody's not glad to be with us. And that's the word we use for shame. It's a horrible feeling. But boy, oh boy, when people know that you're with them, you hear them, you see them, you're a love cake, you're curious, you're appreciative, you're kind, and you maintain eye contact, people are there. So I think when you are in control of a situation, you are setting the culture, you live it out. It is the new normal. It is who we are. So I'm going to pause and ask, how are you? And I'm going to listen for emotion, and I'm going to validate, wow, that sounds really hard, or good for you. But it's going to be it's a journey together. So before it was just me, now I want to have a culture of that we're all together. This thing together
might be hard, but it won't overwhelm us because we're together. We're not alone anymore. So, I look at myself as a culture keeper, guardian, passer honor, but it starts with me. And then I'm able to, if I see somebody doesn't quite get it, that's fine. We're going to grow in this together. But it starts with me, and it's going to flow out of me. And that's my main job I think, of being in control of the culture and what it looks like. Really, it's about joy.
So you didn't just say, all you guys need to grow up and get more mature, and here's how you're going to do it. That wasn't what you did. Okay.
Nor did I say, man, it seems like it just got triggered. What's going on? I didn't say that either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. That's good. How about you, Virgie? What were some things that you found helpful in trying to change culture when you're in a position of influence?
Yeah, what's been for me is knowing my people and finding my tribe.
Okay.
Just knowing that there are others out there that want the same thing that you do. And because of that, don't give up, don't give in, but stand back and reach out to those that that these are my people. These are others that are trying or aiming for the same goal or the same objective. And many times we sometimes think that they have to look like us. They have to be like us. They have to have the personality that we have. But it's not. Many times it's someone that's not like you, that they don't look like you. They're coming from an opposite side or a different perspective. But how do you, as my website said, it's where leaders find balance. How do I find my people? And it doesn't matter what they look like or who they are, but what is it that I need to balance out what it is that we want to create? So this culture that we want, we can't do it just from one side, but we've got to say we need both sides and we need both group of people. So how do we find those people and come together? And to Dave's point, and how do we come together now and have that conversation, whether it be big or small, but it has to be very sensitive, and we have to be able to respond to one another. So what does that look like? And we move and act in that, and we move together.
No, that's a good point, and it's a nice transition into like just our final question here before we go to question and answer time. I invite Nick back on, and it is just a little bit about what you're doing right now, because I know that this isn't just a book you read somewhere. You've really built this into the way that you're leading what you're currently doing. So Virgie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing and what you have to offer people who might be want to benefit from that?
Yeah. So now what I'm doing now is we're running our business as a certified coach, a spiritual coach, and executive coach. So bringing the balance to those that are sitting in both perspectives. To your point, Marcus, many that are spiritual leaders, or there are those that are also in the corporate America that are also spiritual, and yet they're trying to run an organization. So they are split between the culture and values and so forth. So for me, as I continue to do that work, the rare leadership has really continued to be that foundation to build upon that. The other thing is that I find in it is that you, as a leader, that leadership piece can be in your family, it can be in your community, it's in your church, it's with your friends. So it doesn't stop at just being in a corporation or in a company, but we carry that. Wherever I raise my hand and say I want to make a difference or I want to influence within, that's where leadership starts. So in that perspective, what I'm doing now is that this still rare leadership allows me to be free to meet people in the moment, but also to be able to exchange and understand where they are and be able to spend time with them where they are and where they want to go, but to be able to have that conversation so that we can navigate back and forth together, and that now we can bring our two maybe perspectives into that conversation in a coaching moment to help them get to where they are. So that it continues to add that value.
No, I get it. I think you'd be a great coach to work with. That sounds like it would be a lot of fun. And I know coaching is kind of up your alley too, right, Dave? What is it? You want to tell us about WeAlign?
Yeah, WeAlign, we've integrated the brain skills as one of our 3 core competencies with the International Coaching Federation, gold standard of coaching plus strengths, where strengths. But, Virgie, I really love you because I know that's what I want to be one day. What you say so naturally, I'm actually working at to grow in those areas. And so what I've been doing personally is I try to enter and end every day with gratitude and thanksgiving. And so, and then fill in the gap where all of a sudden I feel I'm not being thankful. Then I know things I need to, I'm probably not going to be fully present for that person. So if it's like even preparing for this meeting, I know all you, and I was really, I appreciate you guys and gal so much that it pumped me up because I'm going to be fully present because I do appreciate and I'm thankful for you. So no, that's my little kind of trick that I'm working on, is just what am I going to be thankful for? And then look back at the end of the day, what am I thankful for?
Great. Well, I'm going to invite Nick to rejoin us here and see if we've got, he can tell us a little bit more about this conference one more time that we're going to have, where we get to take a deeper dive into this information and take any questions that may have come in.
Yeah, this has just been super fun conversation, Virgie and Dave and Marcus. So thank you guys for just chatting and letting us listen in. So yeah, if you do have a question for anybody on the panel or just the whole panel, go ahead and type that in the Q&A window. We'll get to as many as we can. And if you have something that popped for you today, something that just stood out as a great quote or a little concept or idea that you want to just say, man, this, when Virgie said this, this really resonated with me. We'd love to hear that as well. So go ahead and type those things in the Q&A and chat window while you can, or while we take a moment to share about the upcoming conference. I want to make sure that everybody is aware of this, because it's only a month away. And we are really looking forward to it, because there are, as we said, a lot of hard things going on right now. And how are we going to be those kind of people that remain relational no matter what comes our way? How do we navigate the high stress workplace that we lead, or the team that we lead? Or again, we're just the entry level person who isn't in a position of power, but we can still lead ourselves, and we can still perhaps bring influence to the culture around us. So want to just jump to the sessions that we're going to be going through. So session 1, Dr. Marcus Warner is going to take us through applying rare leadership to the high stress workplace. It's going to be very practical. Session 2 is going to be Ray Woolridge, who's a retired general in the U.S. Army. I think actually U.S. Air Force, is going to be interviewing Becky Halstead, a retired general as well, about her journey in overcoming a lot of barriers of leadership and how she applied the rare model. And then Enemy Mode at Work is going to be Jim Wilder and Ray Woolridge, who have a new book out coming later this year on enemy mode, and just the brain science behind when you get stuck in that non-relational mode, and how do you recognize it in yourself and others? How do you get out of that? And how do you respond to that when you face that in others? And then we're going to have a panel with our friends, Dave and Virgie, and another guest as well. And then Marcus and Ray are going to bring it home real practically. Like, how do you apply this to your life? Where can you go from here? What's your next step? So it's going to be super, super helpful for anybody. And as we were talking just yesterday in conversation, we're like, sometimes you don't just navigate a high stress workplace. Sometimes just coming home can be high stress. I have 4 kids, age 10 to 16. And that's my toughest leadership role, is actually leading my family into a place of joy and connection and peace as more of our norm than the chaos that it can sometimes be. So we're talking about whether you're even in the business world or you just have friends and family, this is going to be helpful. We try to make this real affordable for everybody. So an individual, you can come for $99. Your team, your staff, or your team at work can come for just the price of 3 people. You can bring up to 15 people on your staff or your team. And then an organization, pretty much any size. If you have 6,000, we'll let you come in for this price. But we're just saying any size organization, bring your whole organization. Everybody will get access to the live stream and the after recordings. So this is just something that we hope that you can take advantage of for yourself. So you'll find all of this at rareleadership.net. We know it's just a month out and you maybe haven't heard about it before. So you're like, oh, that day's not going to work. Again, if you register now, you will be able to join the live stream if you're able. You'll also have access to the recording starting about a week later once we get the videos edited and online. and just pick a day whenever it works for you this year to pull your team aside and just spend a few hours. Or maybe it's just one session a month or one session a week that you grab the team and say, hey, let's talk about this. How do we grow as a team in these ways? So we hope this will be a great resource for you, and looking forward to being back with Dave and Virgie and Marcus on May 6th.
Yeah, that was well said, Nick. All right, so we are here. Here we are. We are, you know, in some ways, rare leadership is designed for the high stress workplace, right? The E is endure hardship well, and so the whole thing is about how do you do that? And when you understand that what the hardship is we're really trying to endure is largely emotion, and the emotion that people cause me, the emotion that problems cause me, you know, all this begins to connect together.
Mhm.
All right, Nick, what are some of the questions that have come
We've
in?
got some great ones coming in. First one came in from Sean saying, hey, I work at a high productivity driven church. What's a daily routine to help those around me become more relationally driven?
Mm.
Well, I'll jump in first since I'm in the ministry world, right? The one of the things that we try to do at Deeper Walk is we do a couple things. We have some meetings that are only relational. And that is every once in a while, like once a month, we'll have a meeting where we get the team together, and it is just a chance to check in, give an update on what's going on in our world so that we feel like we've got a relational connection for those other meetings where you just got to get down to business and get things done. So that's one thing that we do that's kind of practical. Another one is that we try to incorporate 30-second to 1-minute emotional check-ins on regular meetings when that's practical. If you got too many people in the meeting, it doesn't make sense. But just so that people feel seen and heard as they're coming into the meeting, because if they're dealing with something big, you don't have to fix it. You're just aware of the fact that, okay, they got a lot of stress in their life right now, so let's be sensitive to that as we go through this. So those are two things that we do.
Yeah. And this is Virgie. I'll add one thing I think works too. Sometimes having accountability partners so that, you know, people are paired up in 2s or 3s or whatever, because then you don't own it all individually, but they can work together also being accountable to someone else.
Can I add on that I would recommend 3 whenever possible, from the simple thing that 2 tends to create intimacy and that creates issues, whereas 3 tends to defuse just a little bit of the dynamic of having just one person you're partnered with.
Good.
Yeah, and I like to start meetings with celebrations, check in celebrations. So what's going on, and then what's one thing that you know you're celebrating, and then kind of rejoices the joy, kind of sets up the atmosphere. But hey, I as a coach, I've got corporate clients that are type A's, and I usually say, you know, how's that working for you? Or I can help you with that. Because that is not high stress, high pressure church is not sustainable. And so somebody's going to have that conversation that this is less than ideal. Somebody can come along and begin to help you.
Yeah, it can be really confusing because when you're getting results, you assume that what you're doing is correct, right? That we must be doing this the right way because we're getting results. And a lot of times people don't recognize the warning signs that that these results are not sustainable until the culture gets helped. So
that's good. It's got some more comments and questions coming in. Stuart asked, to go on any journey, you need to know your starting point. How do you know where to begin? Do you have any assessments? I'll just mention first that on the rareleadership.net website, we do have a free Rare Leadership assessment. So you can find that and take that and just get a little window of, okay, here's where I'm at. And here's some areas for growth. But related to that, someone asked, what's the best resource used to introduce these concepts to somebody who has no background? Marcus or Dave, what would you guys say?
We're going to introduce the concept to somebody with no background at all.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on whether they're a verbal learner or a book learner. I mean, the Rare Leadership in the Workplace is a really fast read. And also I have recorded a course that you can also get at the website that goes chapter by chapter through it, where I give a 20-minute presentation on each chapter of the book. So those are pretty low stress ways of being introduced to the material.
Yeah, I want to start with the book. It gives you a good framework. But the second step is find somebody else that's a little bit further down the road in this and begin. There's nothing beats in person. And it's one of the biggest challenges to maturity is being able to actually get with people that are a little bit more mature and can talk maturely. So yes, read the book, get with somebody that's that this is part of who they are.
And it really is an easy read. I just want to make sure. I mean, that's how small it is. It's an easy read.
That's good. Well, somebody asked, I'd love to hear more about that balance Virgie referred to. I swing back and forth and this doesn't work well. And I know I have strengths on both my left and right side of the brain, but how do I find that balance?
Yeah, I would say that the first thing about the balance is understanding that you do have both sides. And when you look at both sides, you ask yourself, where am I weighing the most? And when I weigh the most on that one side, when do I find myself weighing at that particular level? What are the situations? What are the circumstances? Then what are the outcomes that I see from being in that place? Then when you start to look at that and say, but what are the outcomes I want? Then it helps you to say, okay, I'm over here to the right. I need to get over here a little more to the left. So what happens basically is your outcomes and your results, they will have to reflect on you. And I'll tell you, another best place is your family. They can really help you and give you that feedback because they're going to be honest, open, and they're with you all the time. They see you at your best. They see you at your less than best. So that's another good place to help you to find that balance. And then we as coaches, like Dave said, and that's what we work with, to help people to understand what it is to find that balance. That's what we do to support you.
That's great. Well, a lot of comments coming in, people saying, someone mentioned remaining the adult in the room by keeping my relational circuits on. That clicked with me. Yes. So yes, that's helpful. If at least somebody's acting like a grown up in the room, and why not us, just even having that language and that idea, like, okay, how do I stay my best self, even when I'm not feeling respected right now, or even when I'm stressed out right now. Somebody mentioned that they really appreciate the concept that my stress is actually just caused by these emotions. Like it's actually these feelings that are driving it more even than the circumstances themselves. A helpful insight there. Somebody asked, how do you actively train your team, or actually, do you train your team actively in the relational skills, or do you just model them?
Good question. The idea, obviously, I say obviously, we wrote the books with the idea that you could train it, right? And they're coaches for the opportunity that you could train it. And where I start, just FYI, is I usually start with our CAKE acrostic, and that's curiosity, appreciation, kindness, eye contact. And the idea that if you just want to infuse a couple of basic skills in the training, get people practicing curiosity in their conversations with each other. And we mean by that, what's your perspective? And what are you feeling about this, right? And then you practice doing that, sharing appreciation regularly, making sure that you're kind in the way that you communicate, and then making eye contact. Those are the 4 key relational skills for remaining relational. So that's usually where I start.
And this is Virgie. I would also say that for me, I stand in a place of behavior comes from somewhere. It doesn't come from nowhere. So when I stand in that place, however the team or the individual show up, I always think about, okay, what's the behavior that I'm observing? And then I realize now this is coming from somewhere. So that leads into the part that Marcus talks about. That's where I become very curious. And as that right brain, that relational person, I want to help you understand. Let's talk about where this is coming from.
Yeah, and just to sum it up, the left brain likes to be taught, the right brain likes to be caught. So it's both to me.
That's good. Well, Jeff asked, do you have any training groups for people to see this kind of stuff work and practice and gain these brain skills beyond watching and listening to the ideas? So we do, as Marcus said, we do actually have a USB drive of Rare Leadership in the Workplace training. So Marcus teaches you just in 20-minute video segments through the book, and then the book will give you more information. And we do have some coaching available. We do have consulting available, and we do have partner ministries like Thrive Today that will get into the 19 relational brain skills that are kind of foundational for some of this stuff. And we'll be sharing more at the Rare Leadership Conference next month of some of the next steps that you can take individually and as a team. So we want to resource you wherever you find yourself in the workspace, home, beyond the nonprofit sector, with what you need to be your best self and to create healthy cultures and healthy teams where you actually are glad to be together. You actually like coming to work because of the people that you're able to work with, and
Yes.
the productivity and everything else just increases as a result of those changes.
It's good. Well, it looks like we're about out of time for today, aren't we? So that went fast. I enjoyed talking to you guys. I feel like we just scratched the surface of some things we could really have a good conversation on. I also just wanted to point out too that if you haven't read the Rare Leadership in the Workplace book, it does have 8 what we call maturity workouts in the book that you can use with your team to actually help them begin taking them through some exercises. So that is in the book as well.
Fantastic. Well, Virgie, Dave, Marcus, thank you so much for this fun conversation. And I'm really looking forward to next month where we get to take a deeper dive together.
Excellent. See you then.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
appreciate
Thanks,
you.
everybody. We'll
Okay, thank you.
see you again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.